This is Bikini, the rim of an ancient underwater volcano in the Marshall Islands. With its necklace of 23 islands, Bikini is a place of beauty and silence and menace. Look closely where the Emerald Lagoon suddenly falls into a vast black hole. This is the crater of one of the greatest man-made explosions, the hydrogen bomb they call Bravo. It vaporized an entire island and poisoned almost everything and everyone. As our plane flew low, we seemed to touch its deathly void. The Marshall Islands lie in the vast Pacific Ocean between the United States and Asia. Captured from the Japanese in World War II, they've long been America's strategic secret, its stepping stone to Asia and China. People here sustain themselves for thousands of years with abundant fish, breadfruit, and coconuts. They were skilled navigators who sail by the stars. Westerners might call this paradise.
Ingat tayo di kualpe, ega nang mananteri, cuman ka lang ulip kay. Nang iyan namin nga na ito kanan na dun. Mga ito kay na kanay. Paruwa ng menang kiladero, or.
All that changed in 1946 when the United States took over the Marshall Islands as a trust territory, with an obligation to protect the health and well-being of the people. A nightmare began. The islands were turned into a laboratory for the testing of nuclear weapons and the people into guinea pigs.
Crossroads, scene 24, take 2.
In this propaganda film, the Bikini Islanders are being deceived. Unknown to them, plans were already underway to destroy their paradise forever.
Will you ask King Judah that the United States government now wants to attempt to turn this great destructive force into something good for mankind, and that these experiments here at Bikini are the first step in that direction? Tell him that's fine. Everything being in God's hands, it must be good.
87 ships take positions 3 miles off Bikini to suffer the shattering impact of the 5th atomic bomb. Here will be
An armada of warships was assembled in Bikini Lagoon in order to blow them to bits.
The decks of the 73 test ships anchored in Bikini Lagoon are scenes of feverish activity as scientists plot experimental programs designed to furnish data on blast effects of the mighty atom bomb. Animals of many kinds
Animals were strapped to their decks like a perverse Noah's Ark. The experiment was to see how they died, how they burned.
Special ointments are applied to determine their protective quality. Other parts of the exposed areas being left bare to the atom blast.
3, 2, 1,
Chibungan ng rane may arod la pamayo. Kami kiri rong jaga ingin ani pulak enot an pulak pamayo. Akem jayita kemuye yurutongam lag diotongan nabot ilo jimarong ranai. Kami iloan enot iya puyin kain kalara oleh kain kalara enot ngai iya ngan merek pulu pro green yellow. Ilo tereo ilo menako ijo terangan pen rutoro rar kakai riri im chang im ketire lo an mo
Ilo cipunganin nga parte ko kaya kamjang arti itu pantaman melaro jaga ini kan ko kamjang ilam nak boleh nor pertuan pada paano nanin kakerja ron jaga jat nanin kaker enangan enoti.
Being on Bikini today is disturbing ghosts. I struggle through the jungle to the bunker where they pressed the button at 6:45 on the morning of the H-bomb test. Now claimed by the undergrowth, it's like a subterranean temple to modern times. They drank milk-made powdered milk, smoked Lucky Strike cigarettes, and later this sign was erected that's beyond irony. It says, "Please leave this property as you find it. Thank you for your kindness and understanding."
The Mamsells give their all for their art, and you can just bet that audience is giving with the Wolf Calls.
The Bikini, named after the atomic explosion in the Pacific. The Bikini was an explosion everywhere.
In 1946, the Bikini swimsuit was launched to celebrate the nuclear explosions that had destroyed life on Bikini Island. The inventor of the bikini, a Frenchman, made his fortune. Today, a bikini body is promoted in magazines as an object of desire and good health. The bodies of the people of Bikini and other islands are the most irradiated in the world. All these women have had thyroid cancer.
Iwa kami ang alam tudo ilo ay wilalay. Emlalo puyinan mengo poda ko wandal tak. Yang alala ping pobo kami ang tudo. Ja pobo poda ba ngayon jowo para. Pobo mleton. Dor ngai bara lagi libag. Eling cetrana kala kargo dalak.
Ilang armi jirar tem dak rarta area. Ilo pungoneo ajuri rorar dari yang mendang tereo. Ilang rar panay.
Today, Bikini is unfit for human life. Radiation poisons the food and water. Our shoes registered unsafe on a Geiger counter. The abandoned cemetery looks out to where the sun rose one morning, then rose again as apocalypse. The equivalent of one Hiroshima bomb was exploded in these islands every day for 12 years. A scarred beauty has returned to the island, but the people haven't. Exiled to barren islands, many of them starved. In 1968, President Lyndon Johnson told them it was safe to go home. But it wasn't safe, and the US authorities knew it wasn't safe.
Ijalaga minin tiyaman karar kamana nga cep accident aglukun molin karar rar do godin kokuri ijin ya enigan enim im inkiya unair tongom enot program kana ito kangarana kaga yo chongan an cherwal payini pen aga karja accident man.
What happened as a result of the Bravo test was that a cover-up was launched very shortly after March 1. I mean, there's such a history of wrong information, outright lies, deception. There was no attempt to take the most conservative approach and make sure that everybody was okay.
They knew where the radioactive fallout was going to go, and they took that risk and went ahead and detonated the bomb, knowing full well which way it was going to go. They still had an opportunity to evacuate, even on the day of the shot. But these people were not evacuated, we were not evacuated, and the people on Utrecht were not evacuated. So it only leads one to believe that, number one, the United States needed some guinea pigs to study what the effects of radiation would do. And that's a pretty strong indication that the United States knew that.
It seems extraordinary. Here we are, this far into the 21st century, talking to people still frightened of all that nuclear fallout, all those tests, all those years ago. The impression I get is that there's so little trust among people.
The U.S. is trying to provide as much information, as much good information as we can. Yeah. And so I wouldn't accept the characterization that that there have been lies and cover-ups.
The word guinea pigs comes up a lot from these survivors.
I would refer you to our embassy website on that.
I've read it.
And that question was looked at during the Clinton administration, and that was not the conclusion they came to.
The secret of the Marshall Islands is Project 4.1. Declassified documents reveal a scientific program that began as a study of mice and became a study of human beings exposed to radiation.
Chicago is where it all began, and to the AEC Argonne Labs in Chicago last week came 7 men, natives of the Marshall Islands. Leben is from Utrecht. He and the rest were irradiated by our March 1954 hydrogen bomb test. John is mayor of Rongelap, which is 100 miles from Bikini. John, as we said, is a savage, but a happy, amenable savage. His grandfather ran almost naked on his coral atoll. The white man brought money and religion and a market for his copra. John reads, knows about God, and is a pretty good mayor. The Iron Room is a radiation detector for human beings. Inside, John, the mayor, whose first visit to the white man's country meant San Francisco cable cars and Chicago skyscrapers and streamlined trains, whose first visit to the white man's country meant the Iron Room. A savage governs his life by ritual, and he understands this because he thinks of it as a new ritual, sitting alone inside the room. Outside, a strange kind of priest in a long white coat. When the ritual of the Iron Room was over for John, it began for the others. As each finished, he was told it was over, and he was given apples and other good things to eat. Then he took off the ritual clothing, and the 7 men put on the suits and topcoats they had been lent in Hawaii, which they would return in Hawaii on their way back in the Marshall Islands, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
United States government documents clearly demonstrate that its scientists conducted human radiation experiments with Marshallese citizens. Some of our people were injected with or coerced to drink fluids laced with radiation. Other experimentation involved the purposeful and premature resettlement of people on islands highly contaminated by weapons tests to study how human beings absorb radiation from their foods and environment.
These people are guinea pigs. They are part of the experiment Project 4.1. They're being returned to Rongelap, an island 100 miles from Bikini, by the US Navy. They were told repeatedly it was safe to go home. This happy couple believed they were going home to safety. The man is John Anjane, the mayor of Rongelap, the happy savage from the Iron Room in Chicago. His wife is Majua, and this is their baby son, Lekoj. They had no idea of the horror that lay ahead. They are being returned to an island described by a US atomic energy official as by far the most contaminated place on Earth. He added, "It will be interesting to get a measure of human uptake when people live in a contaminated environment." The people of Rongelap remained on their poison island for 28 years as guinea pigs, the objects of regular scientific examination.
Ngay chập dukun malala elang nangan bijiray walo pera kana kay ngay chap tawi ijajik tanangan bijiray walo jan cancer mama arbar thyroid per jilelak ni menunong thyroid me ngay chap rar chap apredi etan value chadu rar apredi im bar reaction turuit arangan turuit mi ngay chap tamak ke tuan accident kan ke talali lu dan
The islanders pleaded with the US authorities to move them to safety as evidence emerged that the second generation, the children, were also poisoned. Desperate to leave, the islanders called on Greenpeace to rescue them. This ship, the Rainbow Warrior, moved the entire population to an uncontaminated island. They called it Operation Exodus. This is Dr. Robert Conard, a leading medical scientist of Brookhaven National Laboratories. Conard devoted his distinguished career to examining the islanders. He wrote, "The habitation of these people on the island will afford the most valuable ecological radiation data on human beings. The various radioisotopes present can be traced from the soil to the food chain and into human beings." Dr. Conard gained the trust of whole communities. When he brought the islanders to New York to be examined, he showed them the sights and had them over for a barbecue. When John Anjane's son Lekoj died, aged 18, Dr. Conard sent the man they called a savage a sympathy card from your friend, Bob. In 1957, Majua Anjane was the smiling young woman seen here on her way back to Rongelap, unaware of the danger she and her family faced. This is Majua 28 years later, grieving the death of her son Lekoj from radiation poisoning.
Chuan many nur eurar lori lor air kaman bre eor rei gagni ni jawle bin yenu ni nagar ba enor power rei mujidi eleng jigin enor pore ga tor lu awle ben jigin ulim dit pen pore boy ga awle jigin pen meno join many nur Imino terrain idu agar kalim jawa when I jarbale arjuan minuun eroika kenge ila kalim jawa when I jarbale in mini nur pachik e jalok wawin ewa yang in meno ala bagalam nakaga ole ben minuun dit kun ribelle we rar ko kuralar mundigi in mujidi wayare kakini ni jidu wawin air tagri ingon mini nur pachik ewa yang in meno kalam laujan kaga ole beran emut
Like her son and her husband, Majua died from a virulent cancer. I don't see any great clinics that have been established by, if not the Department of Energy, certainly not by the US government.
There's a clinic downtown in Mount Dro. There's also a whole body counter. You can have the plutonium in your body measured as well. Anyone can for free.
This is the plutonium measuring shop, where they'll tell you how radioactive you are. People waiting to be tested are welcome with a video showing their islands being blown up. And this reassuring commentary.
Yahwehkom Aulip, Etaim Bill Jackson, Program Manager of the Department of Energy, DOE Marshall Islands Program.
This is Rinok, a refugee from the poisoned island of Rongelap, whose family owned land and lived a secure, prosperous life. Now she lives in a shack in the capital, Majuro, with her children and grandchildren. She has no water, no sanitation.
Alang ka na rin ang pagkurente ni ngayon na natin bukod kaya naman natin kurente ni machiverwache. Emi kita kajan cuan ni mo yang menjaga.
And power, she has electricity?
Yung murmurin kami ang cuy.
In 1986, the United States granted limited independence to the Marshall Islanders on condition that they accepted a mere $150 million compensation for the damage caused by nuclear testing. A claims tribunal was set up and soon ran out of money. An appeal to the US Congress more than a decade ago still awaits a reply.
Ilagay pag icap kariri ngaray menen merong paglalu na yan akalabay kadoray rang na ipar uyaki yung mga.
Darlene Keju Johnson was a young health worker who became the champion of her people after she discovered the full extent of their suffering caused by nuclear testing, that many more islands were poisoned than the Americans claimed. This remarkable speech in 1983 broke the silence.
I bring greetings from the Marshall Islands and throughout Micronesia. We have hundreds of women who have miscarriages. We have leukemia cancers. We have thyroid cancers. We have stillbirth babies. We have nowadays, I just come back from home, and I have talked to many women and men in the population, is that we have babies we call jellyfish babies. A baby is born on a labor table, and it moves up and down like this. It's a colorful, ugly thing. It does not shape like a human being. It moves up and down like this on a labor table because that thing is breathing. That is a baby.
In 1982, Darlene married Giff Johnson, the author of this tribute to his wife.
Darlene was one of the liveliest, most entertaining individuals that I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. She was a voice for the voiceless.
Like so many Marshall Islanders, Darlene died of cancer, age 45. This is the largest of the islands, Kwajalein, occupied by one of America's most important and secretive bases. Known as the Ronald Reagan Test Site, it's a missile launch pad that commands the Pacific Ocean all the way to Asia and China. Here, the people of the Marshall Islands are once again being subjected to the testing of weapons of mass destruction designed for a coming war. The base is part of a remarkable plan known as Vision 2020. Devised in the 1990s, its aim is described officially as full spectrum dominance. This means control of all land, sea, air, cyberspace, and space.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
From California, almost 5,000 miles away, the U.S. Air Force tests its intercontinental missiles by firing them at the Marshall Islands.
Imagine a missile coming screaming out of the sky. It's absolutely terrifying. I think that there's really nothing that I can imagine that would be more terrifying than this. And we're talking about devices that any one of them could go off course.
None of this disturbs life on the base, where small-town America has been recreated, a wonderland of the suburban good life.
Fabulous. There's nothing better than living on a tropical island. I pretty much have beachfront property, you know? It's great. I love it here.
Just across the bay is Ebi Island. Known as the slum of the Pacific, more than 12,000 people live here on a strip of land less than a mile long. Many of them refugees from what is now the missile base and from islands poisoned by nuclear testing. Every day, people from Ebi are brought to work on the missile base to water the gardens and the golf course. Then they are ferried back to their poverty. This is apartheid in the Pacific.
Ebi needs a lot of things.
What?
Medicine,
Getting medicine.
education, and job. Vegetable and fruits.
Vegetable and fruits.
Yes.
Here we are, it's a tropical island, and you need vegetable and fruit.
Yes.
Fish, vegetables, and fruit were once abundant on Ebi. Today, fish is contaminated by toxic pollutants, says the Environmental Protection Agency. Now the only food most people can afford is processed and imported. They have the highest rate of diabetes in the world.
When someone gets really ill, do they go to the hospital over on the base? Because they've got a pretty modern clinic over there.
They don't treat them with medicine. They just go there for taking the blood and then X-ray.
So what happens when somebody is seriously ill?
They cannot do anything.
The most consistent example given is the example of the Ronald Reagan missile site and Ebi next to it. On the Ronald Reagan missile site, there's a vivid example of the United States, golf courses and swimming pools and all kinds of amenities. Right next to it is what is called the slum of the Pacific.
It's a challenge. Ebi is in great need right now. We've talked about infrastructure. One of the projects the U.S. is working with our Australian colleagues and with the Asia Development Bank is a sewer and water project, desperately needed for Ebi. Ebi is overcrowded. The schools need repair.
Actually, the U.S. military did a survey back in the 70s and found that the sewers didn't work and the water didn't run and the electricity wasn't there. It only happened not all that long ago. They found almost exactly the same thing. Why hasn't that been fixed?
There's complete agreement that Ebi should be a priority, and not only because of the current activities of the Ronald Reagan Space and Missile Defense Site, but there's also now an additional component that is providing for global security, and that's the Space Fence project by the Air Force.
Every missile fired on the Marshall Islands by the U.S. military costs $100 million each. This derelict school bus is the only one on Ebi. They can't afford to replace it.
The base is not good for us. The people of Marshall Islands, we have no need for it.
It's being used to test missiles to fire at countries like China.
Yes, and anywhere else if they want to.
What would you like to see happen there?
I want our land back.
China is building airstrips in the South China Sea on disputed islands condemned by an international tribunal. This is now a flashpoint for war between China and America. What is not news is that China itself is under threat. These American bases form a giant noose encircling China with missiles, bombers, warships, all the way from Australia through the Pacific to Asia and beyond.
I mean, if you were in Beijing looking out, you stood on the tallest building in Beijing and looked out at the Pacific Ocean, you'd see American warships. You'd see Guam is about to sink because there's so many missiles pointed at China. You'd look up at Korea and see American armaments pointing at China. You'd see Japan, which is basically, Japan's a glove over the American fist. I think if I was Chinese, I'd have a little to worry about American aggressiveness.
And we have China surrounded, and we're doing more all the time to try and keep it surrounded and deepen that containment of China. But China presents a fascinating case of a country that is independent, doesn't have foreign bases on its territory, growing very rapidly, not as rapidly now as it did for 30 years, but still the second-ranking economy in the world.
We have an adversary, and that adversary is China, and that adversary, unless there is dramatic reform inside China, will be our enemy someday.
One myth I think really that needs to be dispelled is that somehow China's aiming to replace America and gonna run the world. It's not. Well, first of all, the Chinese are not that stupid. The West, with its Christian roots, are about converting other people into their beliefs. the Chinese are not about that. It's just I'm not degrading the Western culture. I'm just pointing out the inherent nature, the DNAs of two different cultures. The Chinese 2,000 years ago built the Great Wall to keep the barbarians out, not to invade them.
As the world's economic power moves rapidly to Asia, the response of the United States is to deploy the majority of its naval forces to Asia and the Pacific. This massive military buildup is known in Washington as the pivot to Asia. The target is China. The great power game in the 21st century is called perpetual war. For America's unchallenged arms industry, the annual prize is huge profits from almost $600 billion of military spending.
Once an imaginary weapon on Star Wars, the electromagnetic gun is now reality.
You're sitting there thinking about these next generation and futuristic ideas, and we've got scientists who have designed these, and it's coming to life.
And the smartest weapons need enemies.
As a Pacific nation, the United States will play a larger and long-term role in shaping this region and its future. I have directed my national security team to make our presence and mission in the Asia-Pacific a top priority.
In one sense, is the US already at war with China?
Yes, on the ground and in the air. The winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, President Barack Obama, has committed to trillions of dollars to our nuclear arsenal. He's committing trillions of future dollars to war in space. And we need an enemy for all this money, and China's the perfect enemy.
The aim of this film is to break a silence. The United States and China may well be on a path to war, and nuclear war is no longer unthinkable. In a few years, China has become the world's second biggest economic power. The United States is the world's biggest military power, with bases and missiles and ships covering every continent, every ocean. China is a threat to this dominance, says Washington. But who is the threat? This film is about shifting power and great danger. It's also a film about the human spirit and the rise of an extraordinary resistance among people on the front line of a coming war, where the words "never again" have an urgent meaning for all of us.